The Continental Army suffered a bitter winter of Valley Forge, found glory across the waters of the Delaware, and seized victory from Cornwallis of Yorktown. Our Army manned the airport. It ran the ramparts. It took over the airports. It did everything it had to do. And at Fort McHenry, under the rocket's red glare, it had nothing but victory. And when dawn came, their star-spangled banner waved defiant.
This is Trump's speech during his controversial July 4th parade in Washington, D.C. that was straight out of any totalitarian regime's playbook. But his gaffe, claiming that the Continental Army in 1775 took over the airports, stole the show. And for good reason, considering airplanes didn't exist until 1903. But here was Trump's excuse when confronted with the error.
We had a lot of rain. I stood in the rain. The teleprompter went out, so I had... Yeah, the teleprompter went out. It kept going on, and then at the end, it just went out. It went kaput. So I could have said, and actually right in the middle of that sentence, it went out. And that's not a good feeling when you're standing in front of millions of people on television, and I don't know what the final count was, but that went all the way back to the Washington Monument. And I guess the rain knocked out the teleprompter. So, but no, it's not that. I knew the speech very well, so I was able to do it without a teleprompter. But the teleprompter did go out. And it was actually hard to look at anyway because there was rain all over it.
Now, it'd be one thing if the teleprompter did go out. Trump could simply have had a real human moment and admitted that he misspoke, and that would have been the end of it. But that would mean that he might actually have to admit fault, and if we know one thing about Donald Trump... So instead, he defended himself and said that he knew the speech very well, even without the teleprompter. Which would mean that the teleprompter was a formality, and he actually meant to say that the Continental Army took over the airports in 1775. Nothing like hearkening back to the great Battle of LaGuardia International Airport when we finally captured Terminal B, one of the proudest moments in our nation's history. And there were inaccuracies like this throughout the entire speech. For example, General Cornwallis didn't come from Yorktown, he was defeated at Yorktown, and the Continental Army wasn't named after George Washington, what with it being named the Continental Army. And look, I understand this might be petty, but counterpoint, Donald Trump has no idea what he's talking about, and the fact that he thinks soldiers during the Revolutionary War took over the airports in the late 18th century is proof of that. If this entire debacle was supposed to be a tribute to the military and this country's founding, then you essentially have one job, and that's not to debase the military and this country's founding. But clearly, this wasn't a tribute to anyone but the president. It was a multi-million-dollar taxpayer-funded campaign rally to feed his ego. At a time when reports abound that we can't afford to supply soap to the migrants that we've opted to imprison in the camps on our southern border, the fact that the president mandated a totalitarian-style military rally, complete with tanks, is not only wasteful, but a massive slap in the face to the migrants literally dying in cages. And yet, shockingly, we haven't heard a peep from the fiscal conservatives on the right. This is the party of, but how are we going to pay for it? Who clutches their pearls and cries out atop the highest rooftops when Democrats dare suggest that maybe, just maybe, we should make sure all Americans have health care. And yet they've suddenly gone silent when Trump wants to compensate for his small poll numbers and beat his chest with a multi-million-dollar glorified campaign rally. And this is honestly par for the course. Republicans are happy to dish out $750 billion for a bloated military budget or $1.5 trillion in tax cuts for the rich, but spend anything to keep middle and low-class Americans healthy or, at the very least, alive? Money doesn't grow on trees, people. With all of that said, none of this would have been an issue in the first place if Donald Trump just took the advice of someone whom he admires greatly and asked himself if it really was wise to always have to rely on a teleprompter.